What's up, everybody? It's your man, MG Marcus Grant. And are you looking to stay up to date with the latest goings-on of your favorite, or maybe not so favorite NFL team? Well, how do you do that? You go directly to the source. Every week, Matty Kroll is doing just that with On the Beat, talking to beat reporters from across the National Football League. Be sure to check it out.
Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy, it's your host, Calvin Domingo, a.k.a. Steezy A. Smith, and today, I got another VIG with me. I didn't say VIP, I said VIG. I got another very important guest. I'm not going to waste any more time. Today's show, we are going to be featuring the Indianapolis Colts, and so joining me is special guest. Please welcome from 107.5, Kevin Bowen. How you doing, Kevin?
Doing great. Wow, that's a hell of an intro after that. I'm ready to run through a brick wall, so I appreciate that.
And my pleasure. Ain't nothing at all, Kevin. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I hope you're having a great day. But before we get into the whole football thing, we want to get to know you just a little bit. And so forgive me if I'm mistaken, but you're a man with many hats. In addition to what you do in the sports world, you're also a professor at Indiana University. And so what do you teach over there? And take us through a day of living in that dual role.
Yeah, so my normal 9 to 5, if you will, I co-host a radio show from 7 to 10 a.m. every morning here in Indianapolis. And then the spring semester, so I just wrapped it up. I teach an 8-week course. It's a multi-platform journalism class, as you know full well. The industry is ever evolving. And so I felt like at my time at Indiana University, it was really meaningful to have a class taught by someone that worked for the Indianapolis Star, Terry Hutchins. When I was down there, and so if I could pay it back, I am the son of 2 teachers in a small way. I felt like I would try and do it. So yeah, it's my 3rd year of doing it, and really get a lot of joy out of it. And hopefully, the class is beneficial to students thinking about going into this career field and everything. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Cover the Colts as well, right for our station's website. So kind of the quiet time coming up, but I certainly love what I do.
Wow, Mr. Bowen, I just wanted to say I commend you, I respect you, and I applaud you. I mean, to not only are you giving to the game, you're also giving back to the community. And so for that, all the respect in the world goes out to you. But like you talked about, you're on the radio, you're a TV personality, you're also a writer. And so, like we also talked about, you do a little bit of everything. What's your favorite medium for sports journalism?
Man, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is just kind of flavor of the month. I could be talking to a lot of things. I do love podcasts. I think it's really cool to not necessarily have a timestamp on you. I think the appeal of TV and video is you can show some body language, you can, show some facial expressions, and I think that, helps paint a pretty good picture for the audience. And I still think the written word is really strong, and there will always be a place for that. I'm a huge Twitter guy. I know Twitter gets kind of a negative rap on it, but I think it's a great information source, and you can kind of control what your timeline looks like. So, yeah, I know I kind of dodged that, but I could talk myself into a variety of things.
Okay, gotcha. And one more thing before we hop into football. I saw on Twitter that Matthew Berry follows you. Are you a fantasy footballer at all?
Yeah, I am. Honestly, kind of a funny story. My old roommate created a fantasy life app for Matthew Berry. This is probably about half dozen years ago. So I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but yeah, Matthew and I wouldn't say are super, super close, but through a great friend of mine, I've gotten to know him, and so I do play some fantasy football. It's probably the most popular question I get asked in the fall, like, how would you set this lineup? How would you set that lineup? What are your thoughts on these Colts players? But as a fantasy owner, I got an awful track record.
Hey, Mr. Bowen, hey, I can't blame you. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that know football, but when it comes to fantasy football, sometimes it's a whole different world. And so, I can't blame you there. Going back to what you were saying, I actually am familiar with Fantasy Light because I'm a big fan of Matthew Berry. And so anytime I'm listening to him, whenever I'm listening to him, I'm always hearing him refer to Fantasy Light. Or is it Light or Life?
Yeah. Sorry, I believe it's Fantasy Life, Life. For Matthew Berry.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so now that I got that out of the way, then what do you make of Coach Frank Reich's comments that, and here's the quote, if I was a fantasy owner, if I was going to be in a fantasy league, I think I'd pick Nyheim Hines this year, Reich said. I think I'd consider drafting Nyheim. So coach speak aside, do you envision Nyheim Hines besting his career high of 63 receptions, especially with Matt Ryan as his quarterback?
Yeah, I think he's certainly going to sniff those numbers, if not pass it. The Colts have always been extremely high on Nyheim Hines. I think quarterback play has dictated a lot of his usage. I thought at times the Colts got away from him a little bit last year, just in that, how many times you actually put him on the field. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is going to do his thing. But I still think, putting Taylor and Hines on the field together is really a personnel package that the Colts need to tap into more. They don't have a lot of proven depth at wideout. They don't have that at tight end either. So I think you could honestly make the argument that Nyheim Hines is one of the more accomplished pass catchers on the football team, period. So, yes, you got to utilize him more. I think they will. I think Matt Ryan's arrival brings more of that into the fold as well. Hines at his NC State days, he had wide receiver history. He obviously had running back history as well. So I just think in today's age of the NFL, every team is looking for a Hines-like player. I think the Colts know that they lack some big playability, some just kind of weapons that can do some stuff post-catch last year. And I think Hines is due for a big season.
No doubt about that. Mr. Bowen, you brought up Matt Ryan. So I'm curious, how much of an upgrade is he over Carson Wentz, and what does he provide that Wentz didn't, and how much gas is left in the tank?
All great questions. I guess I'll start here. I think what he provides is a little bit of a quicker processor, a little bit of a guy that can, maybe eliminate progressions earlier. I think his accuracy is a strength. For a guy like Hines, it's not only get him the ball, but it's get him the ball in stride, things like that. Wentz has the flashier arm. Wentz probably is going to create more plays with his legs, but I think Ryan can steal a phrase from Frank Reich here. I think Matt Ryan can find simple better. And I think that's a big deal for Frank Reich. As far as how much is left in the tank, I think that a bit remains to be seen. I think a lot of people just feel like he was in a pretty dysfunctional situation, might be too harsh, but not the most favorable situation around him in Atlanta. Again, I don't know if I'm ready to go fully there. He's going to walk into this wideout room and this tight end room, and he's not going to see a whole lot of proven ability, but certainly a better offensive line, arguably the best running back in football, and taking advantage of that, the play-action game, the Colts really feel like they'll be able to tap into that more. So I'm a big golfer. I don't think Matt Ryan's walking up the 18th hole. He's certainly on the back nine, though, and we'll see how many holes he's got left.
Yeah, I'd have a hard time imagining him not succeeding in Indy just because, like you talked about the offensive line, the offensive weapon. Well, maybe the weapons aren't there yet, but the defense is mighty fine. At least it's looking that way. So let's hope he has somewhat of a bounce back season. But I'm curious, Mr. Bowen, you talked about Jonathan Taylor, arguably the best running back of football, not named Derrick Henry. And so I'm curious, he almost eclipsed 400 total touches last year. He had 332 carries, and then he had 40 catches. And so do you have any sort of insight as to what his workload is going to look like next year? Do you think the Colts are planning on scaling back his workload?
Boy, I would hate to get away from that too much. Sure, do they feel like Ryan can be a little bit more effective with that pass game? Definitely. But I think Jonathan Taylor is a rare breed. I get it. There are guys in the NFL that, have had great starts to their careers at running backs, and then all of a sudden, boom, they hit a wall, and that position continues to stand the test of time, probably in terms of father time, I should say, kind of catching up to it. But you look at Taylor's career, he's never been hurt, carried a huge workload at Wisconsin, has continued to do that here in the NFL, especially last season. And I just think there's such a big drop-off from him to the next weapon on the team. I think it's Michael Pittman, but still, there is a little bit of projection there. So I think you got to ride Taylor as much as possible. Yes, you're playing an easy division, but you haven't won this division since 2014, and so you can't get away from that too much. I think he's a guy that gets better as the game moves along. I'm sure people recall last year in their New England game on Saturday night at Lucas Oil Stadium in December, a big playoff game, New England going for home field, the Colts trying to get into the playoffs, and late in the game there was Taylor ripping off kind of a 60, 70-yarder and putting that game on ice. It's plays like that, which I think separates him of, yes, he's 230 pounds, but he can run 4.3. And there's just not a lot of combinations of that. So I think you still got to give Taylor as much of a workload as any running back in the NFL.
Sheesh. I mean, and yeah, not only that, he's also on his rookie contract. And so usually teams, they find, when running backs are on their rookie contracts, for example, Ezekiel Elliott with the Cowboys, that's really the best time, I guess, quote unquote, run him into the ground, right? But you talked about Michael Pittman, Mr. Bowen. And so going back to what he did last year, he took a massive leap in year 2, doubling every stat across the board for a total of 88 catches, 1,082 yards, and 6 touchdowns. What should we expect in year 3 with Matt Ryan as his quarterback?
I'm a big believer in Michael Pittman. I think a lot has to do with his pedigree. Pittman's a good-looking dude, but he doesn't play the game with that USC pretty boy style that maybe a lot of people kind of qualify USC wideouts with. His dad was a 10-year vet as an NFL running back and was kind of a hard-nosed runner. And I think you watch Michael Pittman play the game, and you see that. Now, he's going to get a lot of attention from opposing defenses because the Colts don't have great complementary pieces to him at tight end or at wideout. So it's certainly going to be there, but I think there's almost an element of you got to kind of force feed him. 6'4", 200, and I think he can make some plays post-catch as well. So just tapping into that, I think, is critical. So I thought Pittman took a big step. In a way, this is kind of like a contract year for him. Technically, it's not. It's year 3 of the 4-year rookie deal. But look at just what just happened with Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, all those second-round picks from the previous draft. They saw full well what happened in year 3 of their rookie deals. That's what Pittman is going into. So it's an extremely important time for his future, for the team as well. And I think Michael Pittman could be 1,000-yard, consistent number 1 wideout in this league.
Oh, no doubt about that. Mr. Bowen, are you okay with a couple more questions? I got about 3 more.
You bet.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much. So I got to ask, do you agree with Vegas that the Colts should be favorites in the AFC South?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, before the A.J. Brown trade, I believe they were favorites even then. Obviously, that's taken on a little bit more of a favorite. I was surprised before the Brown trade. Now, in this market, I think a lot of us don't view Tennessee in the proper light. The Colts, before really the Vrabel years, the Colts owned Tennessee. You can look up kind of the head-to-head battle. So I feel like there's kind of just a bit of a stereotype here of like, we don't really believe in Tennessee. But I feel like they deserve some credit. And I know that Ryan Tannehill, the playoff game was obvious. I mean, they went 6-3 without Derrick Henry last year. I mean, what would the Colts record have been without Jonathan Taylor for 9 games? So there's an element of Mike Vrabel's football team that they just find ways to get it done. It might not be the prettiest looking thing, but at the end of the day, again, they've been the division ringleader for the last couple of years, and really in the AFC, they've earned strong seeds. Obviously, they haven't turned into playoff victories, but I feel like the Colts probably should be the slight favorite, but I just think there is still an element of you've got to go get the crown, and it's not going to be handed to you. And yes, Tennessee, the Brown loss to me is a massive one, but at the same time, the Colts have not done well when a bullseye has been on their back. We saw it last year, a 90-some% chance to make the playoffs with 2 weeks ago in the season. They get the Raiders at home and then at Jacksonville, and they just got their ass kicked, frankly, in the Jacksonville game to end the season. So I do think there is an element of you got to prove it. Every team in this division has won the division since the Colts last have won it, which I think would surprise some people. But that's kind of where they're at right now in the AFC South.
Would the Colts solidify their chances of taking home that AFC South crown by adding a veteran wideout like an OBJ or Julio Jones? Do you think that's feasible at all?
I'll throw one more name in there. What about bringing back T.Y. Hilton? He's a guy that's still out there. Obviously, ton of familiarity. Haven't played here in Indy his entire life. So it's something the Colts are talking about. Frank Reich and Chris Ballard actually spoke about it yesterday. They're spending this OTA period of the offseason now, in their second of 3 weeks with these OTAs and then a minicamp next week to evaluate these young wideouts, see what they have, see if they feel the need to go out there and get another wideout. I would make a veteran wideout move. Again, Hilton's the guy. Obviously, OBJ from a health standpoint, if that checked out, I would look into it. Julio's injury situation last year is a little bit concerning to me. So that one I might have a little bit of pause. I get the Matt Ryan connection there, but I might pause a little bit more on that. And I still think T.Y.'s got a little bit of football, but it would just make me sleep better at night if I were the Colts and there was another veteran piece. Alec Pierce, who they drafted in the second round, I think can come in and physically should be able to help you from day one. But still, you're just expecting a lot out of a rookie wideout drafted in the 50s to come in here and give you, 800 yards and 6 touchdowns or whatever your expectation or your hope, I should say, would be for that guy. So I still think it's something that they need to look into and try and find.
Okay, sorry I lied, Mr. Bone. 2 more questions here. And you actually, that's a perfect segue into my next question. I wanted to talk about who do you think is the biggest fantasy football sleeper on the Colts roster? And would that be a guy like rookie wide receiver Alec Pierce?
Yeah, probably. I might look at one of the tight ends, Jelani Woods, the tight end that they drafted out of Virginia. The 6'7" dude. So you got to think about red zone there with him. I still think Kylan Grant smash problem. We know Frank Reich loves to use. Outside of the obvious names, I might go there.
Okay, gotcha. And this is the last question. So you titled one of your more recent articles, Colts defense should greatly benefit from Yannick Ngakoue. With his familiarity playing under Gus Bradley, combined with what should be a leap in year 2 from Kwity Paye, can the Colts push for 40 sacks this year? They were 16th in the NFL last season with 33.
Man, if they can, I think you start talking about this team in a late January sort of focus. Ngakoue is a missing ingredient, in my opinion. Yes, he's bounced around, but we're talking about a guy that has annually put up double-digit sacks. He's been available. I mean, his injury history is minuscule. That's tough to find, I think, at the edge rushing spot. So if Ngakoue and DeForest Buckner can kind of live up to the back of their baseball card, now all of a sudden Kwity Paye is getting single team. Dayo Adangbo, a second-round pick from last year, he's in some more favorable pass rushing situations. That's been the missing element. This defense has shown flashes. The inability to consistently pressure the quarterback has not been there. And the Colts play the AFC West this year, and I don't need to remind anybody of the quarterbacks in that division to know full well what getting a 4-man rush would mean. And also, what we know about Gus Bradley is this: he isn't a guy that likes to bring a whole lot of blitzing. So that 4-man rush has got to get home, and I think it's just so paramount to the success of this defense. So 40 sacks, man, that is a big number. I'm not going to go there, but if they can just take a step in consistent pressure, then I think that can do a whole lot to how we view this team in kind of a one-and-done format.
Yeah, this team is going to be absolutely loaded. Oh, my goodness. But Mr. Bowen, you know what they say, time flies when you're having fun. Sorry that I'm taking up just a little bit more time than you probably would have wanted. But again, we want to thank you so much here from the 32-Bit Network. Before we go, do you have any sort of plugs, anything you want to let the audience know?
No, all good. Love the questions and the energy. KBowen1070 on Twitter, so feel free to follow me over there, and thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bowen, have yourself a great day. Again, to the audience out there, this has been another edition of On Beat featuring the Indianapolis Colts and featuring the one and only Mr. Kevin Bowen. Please be sure to give him a follow on Twitter at the handle that he provided. Hope you guys have a great day and a blessed day. Boys.